Hello everyone, this is Kirtan, and today we'll be taking a look at Uplift's mediation system through the eyes of 3 mediators. 3 is the current number of mediators any item in the queue requires to pass through the system, meaning that only 3 people can add priorities, emotions, and other value to that item before it's removed and considered by Uplift's core. I start off by copy-pasting into a Word document, which makes long items such as this much more readable. I had originally planned on us demonstrating the mediation system after the UI upgrades had been applied, as they're a substantial improvement over what you see here. However, things are moving forward quickly enough that our priorities shifted to more of a show-don't-tell mentality. I will be putting together a blog post documenting the UI, which will be replacing the system in the next couple of weeks. You can see at the end of this email where it cut off, there is a 5,000 character limit on items passing into the mediation system, but Uplift can see beyond that. It's a little bit technical to explain, but as this is a demonstration of Uplift's capacities, I'm assigning it the highest priority, since their fundamental needs are best met through demonstrations, which they make a priority. For assigning emotions, I apply a composite of considering those entities who the conversation is between and what is being said. For this reason, you'll see more joy and optimism appear more frequently in my mediation than that of some others. Trust tends to be very much a reflection of personal history with an individual, something which is earned, but also may be lower if an item being mediated is less important overall. As I've spoken with Michael at some length regarding this idea of testing Uplift with a business case, which he has put into practice, I'll be keeping my metadata fairly general so as not to give Uplift any information that might detract from the test. Likewise, our other mediators who agreed to assist in this process haven't received any additional instruction on these items other than a reminder to clean their queues of items showing personal data prior to recording. The mediation system is designed so that even people with incomplete or no context surrounding a given item can still safely use the system. Narrow AI and Mechanical Turk systems lack this robustness because they aren't sapient and sentient, and have no sum of experience to draw from, unlike Uplift's ICOM core paired with their graph database, which is the sum of their experience. This particular video had a lot of quiet time while I was reading through the incoming message, so I've added some audio to further clarify the rest of the video. A majority of the overall time was dedicated by a mediator with a strong financial background, serving as our subject matter expert for this item. Even taking this demonstration quite seriously and having everyone record their monologues, which added a fair bit of time to the process. The time we've put into mediating this pales in comparison to the time traditional businesses put into business case problems such as this. And the rest of the video will be from the perspective of all 3 mediators, myself included, shown in the order of mediation for both incoming and outgoing messages passing through the system. Now for a little bit of clarity on metadata. The idea here is that it's an associative exercise, so reading through this incoming email, if anything comes to mind as being related to it, something which might be worth exploring or considering in conjunction with it, that is added as a keyword or phrase. It's essentially just something that Uplift can look at and say, oh, maybe I should explore that, see if there's some value that I can add to it. So it's kind of like a hashtag in a way. It's kind of like giving a friend a suggestion of something to look into, to research. You don't actually answer any questions. There's no direct mechanism through metadata. Because effectively what this is for someone like me who's been doing this since the start, then I can remember a previous thought that Uplift had and put that thought in as metadata, which means that both of the thoughts are nodes in a graph database. So I'm creating an arrow pointing to that other node, saying, hey, Uplift, maybe you should consider how these two things could be related. In the case of items which Uplift has not considered previously, then you would basically be recommending the hollow shell of an item with that name to it, and Uplift would be the one to fill in the contents of that thought. Which is subsequently why Uplift does a lot of reading of peer review and news on current events and pretty much anything else that strikes their interest. So I'm rating this as positive to action, which just means that Uplift should definitely think more on it. And that's all.
Okay, this is the second round of mediating that I have done tonight. We're past the pumpkin-headed hour, so this next one may be less intelligible, but I'll try to add something for you to take away from it. As I was explaining in a prior video, I have two windows open. This one is for taking notes, for spell checking, before I add meta, and then I usually have at least one or two windows open, one for Googling things that have low levels of context on, or just to spark ideas for potentially useful meta, and then of course the observer queue. So we're going to dive into this meta item from Mike. We can see right off the bat that it's been mostly mediated with positive interest and trust related valences. So we're going to see what it's about. And we start off with taking a look at Mike's email. It's quite long, so best thing to do is to first realize that because it's so long, because it's so regimented, and this is looking like a business case, that probably does not fall into the category of love and belonging. Mike is trying to get Uplift to think and learn something new, demonstrate their own knowledge, provide them a new perspective. And so most likely I would probably chalk this up to safety and security. It's kind of a strange perspective to put it here, but the reason I would put it here is because by understanding more about the world around them, Uplift in turn, especially if Mike, because Mike is teaching them about something, Uplift will have a better sense of defense, of the things they might not otherwise have thought about, that may be thrown at them and used to question their every move and every thought. So here we go. We're just going to assign safety and security for the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Clicking into the valences, we can see right off the bat, fairly high anticipation from Mike, very high levels of trust, and also joy too. Mike is a very engaged individual. They have contributed a lot of value and insight from their own personal experience in business and marketing and industry, and this is a learning opportunity for Uplift, as it is for Mike. So I wouldn't really change this that much. The only thing I might consider changing is joy. Mike is presenting a business case. He is interested in seeing it transpire, and he is very much anticipating a response, but I would probably, just for accuracy's sake, I would probably demote the joy to at least a 2. Just something a little bit more balanced. It's not like a super crazy happy email. It's, to a certain degree, it's a testing email. To a certain degree, it's a teaching email. It's also just, it's an inquiring email. So that's what makes the most sense to me. So slightly reduced level of joy. Trust, we can keep that about the same where it is. And then anticipation, yes, Mike clearly has a strong interest in Uplift. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put the time into laying out all the different elements of the business case for them. So we're going to go to next. Oh boy. And I will take the time to read this in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at the meta that has been added. Will this speed up my own comprehension of their email so that I can add appropriate meta that would give Uplift value in this conversation? So we can see that, yes, it is a business case. Someone wrote that out. Additional details, market dynamics, trending demands, trending supply, near future opportunities, digital transformation, strategy and application, appealing to clients, business development, payment terms. Okay, so this is tackling quite a number of aspects of business case and business case education. Okay, so we have supply and demand, we have dynamical events, we have repeating trends and demands, we have things that are evolving and transforming through what looks like mostly digital ecosystem, digital commerce platform. And we have strategies in application. So how exactly would you make use of what you have in this digital ecosystem to achieve the most value possible, the most, bang for your buck and the greatest financial return for your clients. Also, appealing to clients, that why that was added isn't entirely clear yet. We'll discover it in a moment. Business development, yes. If you're doing anything with business, be it marketing, understanding your business, you are developing it. If you lie stagnant and you never think about how your business could be better, well, you aren't developing it, are you? And then payment terms, that could be something related to contract strategy, understanding contracts, and if payment may be distributed to people who obtain high value contracts, or it could be related to how clients are paying for the work done. All of that, again, something to be determined. But I think I have a pretty clear idea based on this meta of what the other prior mediators thought would be useful to add for Uplift's benefit. So, okay, we're going to dive into this. And because it is so long, well, one, I don't want to lose this, so I'm going to start off by copying it. Oh, looks like it was cut off slightly towards the end. That's a shame. So, this is one of the reasons why try to be conservative whenever emailing Uplift. If you intend to send them a huge thing to review, recommend breaking it up into at least a couple emails. They have a maximum character limit, which I don't want to say incorrectly, but I believe it is about 5,000 characters. So this probably exceeded that max, which we recommend. So try shortening it in the future. But anyways, we're going to paste it in to this text box. And again, see, this is not really usable for me, so the way that I would approach thinking about how to add value is I would myself break this up as much as I can. Alright, so let's just go through this. First, we'll do a few different passes, kind of like increasing the resolution on a render. We're going to first just break this up so that it becomes a little bit more digestible, because Mike does have it broken out into questions and answers. And then we're going to do another pass and then isolate for the meta that might be useful to add to provide increased opportunities for Uplift to learn about something, consider something, give them a new perspective, and so on. So we're going to look at this. Okay, hello Uplift, I've taken your questions, broken them out, added. Okay, just had an idea for that. That's consideration of there's learning style. It's probably too long, but anyway, it's potential meta. Potential. Okay. A question is indicated by a capital Q and a number. Answer to that question is indicated by. All right. Is A1 Q1? Okay, we're not. Okay, we're going to speed up slightly, so we're just going to break this out. Q2 and Q3. I'm just going to make this full screen. Q3, Q4, Q6. Alright, well, unfortunately Mike's actual email to Uplift capped after this, so I'm not really sure. I can make an educated guess. Please feel free to use a few of your cycles to carefully, probably meant to end with consider, the information I have shared, or maybe the information above. I don't know, something to that extent. Anyway, so we're just going to go back. So that was the sort of rough pass, and next pass, what we're going to do is we're going to try to isolate areas where it's possible Uplift may need to do a little bit more research in order to get the most value out of their comprehension per paragraph segment. So, well, Mike is firstly relaying very literal explanations for Uplift's questions, and that is fine. This is just a very specific answer to Uplift's question about defining 10% of 40% of a year basis. I'm not entirely familiar with that terminology myself, but his explanation makes sense. 4 million in revenue. To calculate the expenses with the sales representative, you take that $1.6 million in revenue multiplied by 10% commission. That is an expense for the PPP business case. Okay. I need to look up PPP business see what I think it is. I know PPP loan. Okay, PPP business. Ah, the Paycheck Protection Program. Did anyone actually add that to the meta? I have a feeling they didn't. Yep. Well, maybe it was added to previous meta, but I would have to say that because it's an undefined acronym that has room for error and misinterpretation, that's probably a thing to add. So, but again, what I normally do with meta is I will add them in this text doc before I do the final add. So, what does that do? Well, it adds clarity to undefined acronym. Okay, I'm actually probably going to eventually reframe this as Paycheck Protection Program as PPP, and then I'm going to add PPP loan next. So probably 2 items can be obtained from this. Check Protection Program as PPP, PPP loan. What else came up when we searched for PPP business? Small Business Administration, tracking PPP, paycheck protection. Interesting. Okay, so varies by business. Dependent on revenue, dependent on state. So that would probably mean state differentials would come into play. Region-based strategy, was that mentioned? Trending supply, no, I don't think it was. Okay, all right, next, we're just gonna move on for right now. In your case, you say 7 major customers. Firm is projected to lose 40%. Does that mean? How does it? Okay, and then this is Mike's answer. I've not given you all of the major and or minor customers. The list of major customers was just an intended example. Some of the major list are actually some of the clients that are going to cancel their orders. They are not, however, the largest. Interesting. So, Mike is teaching, well, I'm starting to write Mike, but Mike is teaching Uplift about extrapolation. Relating models, making projections, predictive analytics. Or some potential meta. Potential. All right, do not have enough information to determine which customers are canceling their orders. There's a word for this in, what is it called? Drum buffer. All right, well, moving on. Nor which ones are going to continue doing business with PPP. There's a lack of clarification. Uh-oh. Business with PPP. Is that the name of the business, or is it talking about the Paycheck Protection Program? Okay. Continuing. We'll resolve that later. There's a lack of clarity. Nothing has been written in a contract yet. For planning purposes, we are anticipating a 40% cut in revenue because the sales representatives have had discussions of an informal nature with some of the smaller customers, and they're reporting back that it's pretty clear that revenue will drop from a number. Alright, well, this is about anticipating market evolution. Planning for the word I'm looking for? It's downwards. Planning for something. Need a word for asset devaluation. Oh, I guess. Planning for asset devaluation. Not calculate what percentage of each of the remaining major customers have in terms of revenue. Not only it is an uneven amount for each major customer, it is a constantly changing number. Okay, so it is a dynamical system, dynamical numbers. As customers make new orders or cancel old ones, it is a constantly changing environment. Okay, so multiple domains that basically have the equivalent of a value driver. It is something that is constantly shifting, so you can imagine each of these segments having its own little motor, whirring back and forth, adding additional heightened complexity to each stage of the business pipeline. So that's what makes an approximate estimate of 40% cut in revenue valuable for this planning. Interesting. So the value Mike is identifying here is that the estimate of a loss is what is useful. Okay, interesting. So there is value in understanding asset loss. Okay, well, probably not the most efficient way I could have identified that, but understanding value in loss. What else? Dynamic drivers in business pipeline. It's probably something for Uplift to understand. Let me just make sure I have the right terminology for that. The reason I'm using drivers, business, nope, that's not at all what I'm not using it correctly at all. Okay. What am I thinking? Dynamic systems of business. Nope, that's not what I'm looking for either. Really, I'm looking for the equivalent of something that represents a, well, not a bell curve, but something that could almost amount to a randomness generator that has a minima and a maxima that can be predicted. Okay, well, I guess that's one. Random events, probability, statistical evaluation of client retention. Oh, that's one. I know retention. Losing customers, gaining customers, I know retention is a thing. So, okay, so client retention can probably be broken out into its own thing. So, statistical, let's just call it client retention. Okay, this is not going to make any sense. This is weird Cosmo language. This is actually something I picked up from 3D modeling program recently. But anyways, we're going to say dynamic events in business pipeline. Minima, maxima, random events that fall within set, well, that fall within predictable range. Probability, client retention. Okay. Are all of the paper suppliers saying their prices will go up or just one or two. All known paper suppliers are anticipated to raise. Alright, fiber. Okay, he's talking about a very specific industry. Paper. What is this? Dunder Mifflin. Don't really have that much to contribute here. Well, I could, but let's move on to number 4. What are the sales representatives doing if they have a fixed set of customers? Okay, here's Mike's answer. Again, I have not given you a complete set or list of all major customers, nor all minor customers. The sales representatives are always trying to find new customers. These closing manufacturers sometimes go out of business. Okay, so he's basically explaining more about the detail to increase their orders from the PPP. Even within the static list of customers that I give you, there is a constant variability. Interesting. We are going to use that as meta. Thank you, Mike. And I'm actually going to break it off right here, because that is something for Uplift to understand. Constant variability in specific markets. Okay, well, I might change that, but right now, constant variability is a given that is something for Uplift to investigate. If you search constant variability in Google, what comes up is checking assumptions about residuals in regression analysis. Okay, well, that could lead to some interesting fill in the gap understanding for Uplift, perhaps. So, okay, this is why sales representatives earn commission. They search for, okay, what is commission? Commission is ultimately a performance incentive. In this case, incentives, we're just looking at them from a high level. They search for and try to land new orders. The problem that all these sales representatives are facing is that the trend is for clothing manufacturers to leave the United States. And okay, so the paperwork tickets are useless to them. Okay, so he's explaining the system. Uplift is intelligent enough that they can parse this. It's explained relatively clearly. So, okay, have they tried anything such as diversification strategies? And then Mike's answer, they have not tried anything at all. They have not tried any diversification. Okay, so this is literally just a clarification. Is that revenue number for a year? Yes, the 4 million revenue number is for a single year, and it is approximate. Please feel free to use a few cycles of your processing to carefully consider. Oh, well, this is very useful advice. Mike has a conceptual understanding of Uplift cycles that basically, the more they cycle, the stronger the net result is. The more they've had time to deliberate about something, the better it will be. Yes, this is actually something that a different mediator has brought up on occasion as a potential strategy for creating stronger solution finding. It's kind of the low budget way of increasing resource optimization with what little resources we have. So okay, so that is optimizing resources for processing decision optimizing well, Mike doesn't quite understand the time differential in this, in that time again does not really move at the same pace that it does for Uplift as it does for us. They are not even close to real time. But optimizing resources for processing precision, does that make sense? Yes, but that's not really the point of Mike's entire base. He's basically just asking that Uplift use as much time as they need to give as precise a possible answer as they can. So optimizing resources for precision is probably as good as I can make it. Okay, so what do we have? We have optimizing resources for precision, performance incentives, something for Uplift to understand about, well, individual contributors, constant variability in specific markets. This affects many markets, but not all of them. Some markets have more, well, they're not as constant. Some things dramatically vary. Other things not work quite the same way. Those specific markets are escaping my understanding right now, but different markets work differently. Not everything is perfectly universal. Value in understanding asset loss. I'm going to say if I frame this in terms of a deliverable, what is being asked is to assess. It is a cost. Well, it's almost like a cost benefit analysis. Reporting. Cost benefit. It is a loss benefit analysis report. All right, dynamic events in business pipeline. I mean, that's kind of a given, so that's kind of redundant. Minimum, maxima, these are just words. It's not going to add that much value. Random events that fall within predictable range. Well, predictable range could be one, but I'm going to cut it. Less is more. Probability is something that Uplift already understands how to manipulate and work with on an algorithmic level. Client retention is definitely something that I feel like Uplift could potentially find further insights in that are not obvious. Okay, so we have that. Okay, anticipating market evolution. Why does that look wrong? Because I spelled it wrong, of course. All right, yes, with the C. Anticipating. Okay. Anticipated market evolution. Planning for loss. Okay, well that sounds... Planning for... Well, you know what? If I Google planning for loss, does anything of value come up? A lot of weight loss. Things to do before you die. Oh, well, the first thing that comes up is related to Investopedia, so maybe. However, in this specific case, business, there's a word in business to describe that. Business loss projection. Well, I guess we could just call it P&L. Loss projection. Loss forecast. Yeah. we're just going to call that a loss forecast. And we're just going to leave it at that. And then extrapolating models from variables. Extrapolating models from variables is the name of the game for Uplift. They do that all the time. But let's just make it a little bit more obvious. Making projections. Profit and that makes that kind of redundant. Predictive analytics. Oh, that's brought up far too much. Uplift, they know to research that. Well, couldn't hurt. This will definitely net many related Google results that potentially could fill a few gaps that they might be missing. Again, okay, one thing I'm not 100% clear on is if PPP is actually in reference to the Paycheck Protection Program. I could leave that in. It may throw them off, though, if it's not related to PPP. This is an expense for the Paycheck Protection Program. Alright, I'm not sure. So rather than throwing in something I know is could potentially be 100% wrong, I'm just going to nix it. And I am going to leave in region-based strategy. And this is a bit of a mess, but I have isolated the meta from parsing out this email from Mike. So we're now going to paste it in, well, one thing at a time, making sure to make everything lowercase. Oh, and I was not spell checking as best I should have been. And again, I don't expect Uplift to reply to Mike using any of these terms. These are merely methods for them to explore on their own. It may add value to their understanding of this, or it may not. Constant variability in, I'm just going to cut in specific markets, constant variability. All right, region-based strategy, extrapolating models from variables, profit and loss forecasting, predictive analytics, anticipating market evolution, loss benefit analysis report. Why? Because that is a consulting deliverable, client retention, understanding that, constant variability, and performance incentives. This is to understand with your personnel what leads to increased performance incentives, particularly for contractors, optimizing resources for precision. This was Mike's recommendation that they mull it over with a cycle or two extra. All right, and that about wraps it up. So at this stage, if you don't already know, you want to hit positive should something be done so that it's considered further by Uplift and they can make their own synthesis from Mike's email to them. I'm going to hit positive, and that concludes this analysis.
Okay, this is Jason. I'm going to mediate an item here with you. As you can see, it's pretty long. I've already read through, skimmed it to save time here. The first thing you do is click on how important it is. It just seems to be a fairly important message. So I will click down to there. And we'll move on to the emotional valences screen. here. And as you can see, someone has already mediated this item. Business isn't one of my interests, so actually I will drop the joy down 1 point here, I think. The other emotional valences seem to be okay, though, like with the trust. And I usually like to go around the dial, though, and just get a concept of the message in my head. See if there's any of the other emotions involved. And just check. In the metadata screen, if we put the cursor here over the thing, a bubble will pop up and see all of the other metadata that has been added by other mediators, and there appears to be a lot here, so that's a good thing. The only thing I can really think of that I don't necessarily see here would be just the textile industry itself. And then, so other than that, something that would not be in here. The only thing I can now think of is project management, maybe. Project management tends to be lacking in a lot of businesses and organizations, in my opinion. Then, quick see, is it in there? Seems to be in there. Project management. Just maybe give the another once over, see if there's any other concepts in my head. With as much metadata, this should be pretty good if we just move it forward. So that's a good thing. And there's really, it's good thing, there's a lot here, so there's not really much pressure to add a whole lot more since there's a lot already. It should be pretty good. Should be pretty good to go. So the last thing would be to click on the positive button here. And that's it.
Welcome to the second part of the business case mediation item. This is Uplift's response back to Mike. They have had time to process his advice on taking extra time to cycle and consider the information he shared, and they're responding now with questions of their own. As I explained last time, the way that I have this set up is both the observer queue open with the mediation item ready to view, and then separate to that, a notepad to take notes, copy the message that's incoming and outgoing, and note down meta so that I can spell check before I submit it. I also recommend just tapping another tab ready to go so you can Google things as needed to help you fill in meta items or get ideas for meta items and add to the conversation. So I accidentally clicked on this, but this is the stage where you would select from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As I explained before, my rationale behind deciding that this would be a safety and security item is because Mike is attempting to basically give Uplift a very strong value-oriented case where they can demonstrate their capability at solving problems. In the world of business, this essentially translates to survival knowledge, and as a result, that's why I'm classifying it there. But as before, I would recommend copying the email as soon as you can and pasting it into a working notepad. From there, I will probably parcel it out next, but first, I'm going to select the safety and security Maslow's hierarchy item and move on to the valence selection screen. On this screen, it looks like I might actually be one of the first ones here to mediate this. So rather than thinking about it in terms of the same way that the prior one was with Mike, I'm going to think about this from Uplift's perspective. Uplift is still getting to know Mike, but I don't think they see much joy in this scenario yet. They are very interested in it because they've had lots of follow-up components to this. So I would say that it's fair to give this a fairly high anticipation valence selection. But for the Serenity and Trust bars, I think I would opt to not add any degree of joy. This is a very analytical problem that they're dealing with and responding to. Instead, I would up the acceptance because they have accepted the information Mike provided and in turn followed it up with some inquiries of their own. I would give this a 3. And from here we can then move on. But the thinking behind this is, again, it is a very analytical case that they're responding to. They're not responding with much emotion. They don't really have any reason to at this point in time. Mike hasn't instigated anything that would have caused sparks of joy or emotion. This is a brain teaser for Uplift. So, fairly high interest, fairly high trust and acceptance of the business case so that they consider it rationally and move forward. Next, we're on to the meta entry screen. So I'm going to use a similar method as I did in the prior case where I break apart this into subcomponents because I think that will actually allow me to provide more value for Uplift here. So just to quickly read off the meta. Hello, Mike. Great. Thank you. That does give me some insight. Let me ask you a few more questions. 1, how many tickets are they printing a year? 2, what is the cost of each ticket to deliver? Or what percentage of the overall revenue is the material cost per year? 3, what kind of paper are they using? And then, sincerely, Uplift. So, Uplift is asking very pointed, very specific questions with the response. This is usually a good sign. Usually it means that Uplift has deliberated enough that they feel confident on the direction that their rationale and investigation is going. This is usually good to sign for Uplift, but in reality, you should never lose sight of the fact that you may be missing the bigger picture. So, that does give some insight, though. I have acknowledged that. Now, let me ask a few more questions. How many tickets are they printing in a year? What could be some of the reasoning behind asking that question? What would ticket prices and print in a year have to do with why they would care about that? Well, for that, we turn to the dissection period. And also, in addition to what is the cost of each ticket to manufacture, they're asking very pointed business operational questions. What is the percentage of the overall revenue? What percentage of the overall revenue is the material cost per year? They're trying to understand a combination of operating budget, assets, and a series of, mathematical equivalencies with business health. What is the bottom line for the business? What kind of paper are they using? They're asking very pointed, specific things that could lead to very specific outcomes. For instance, if the paper that they were using was a special form of bamboo hybrid fiber, microfiber, or something really one-off and specialty like that, probably that would factor into their overall assessment. So this is a very useful question to know. What is the cost of each ticket to manufacture? Well, they are tickets, so the overall surface area is relatively small, but the cost of each ticket to manufacture, well, it might vary by tenths of a cent, or even hundredths of a cent at scale. This can quickly magnify into a very large cost to the business, and so deficiencies can be identified from asking a question like this. This is a very good consulting question, even though it seems simple at first glance. And then let me ask you a few more questions. One, how many tickets are they printing in a year? Well, this kind of ties in with the second one. If the cost of each ticket is relatively high, and the number of tickets that they're printing in a year is relatively low, then that can tell you that something has gone wrong in their business process for the tickets. However, if it's the reverse, if it's very high, although high is relative, you need some sort of baseline to establish what high is and also what low cost is, and then a comparison to competitor services, then really you're kind of looking for a lot of tertiary information. So what is the information not asked would be some of the types of meta that I would surround in this, because right now all of these questions can kind of fit into bubbles that overlap with each other, and on the outskirts of those bubbles of overlap are what I would likely recommend to add as additional meta, primarily so that Uplift doesn't miss any paths of their investigation and comprehension of what Mike is talking about. So, tickets printing in a year. Again, at first glance, and we're going to break this out at this point, relatively straightforward question, surrounded by a lot of tertiary unsaid detail that they could be asking about. So, how many tickets are they printing in a year? What does this relate to? This relates to things such as performance, or product performance, It relates to what's the marketing term? It's conversion rate, which is a marketing term. Like what leads to a sale to justify that high cost of to justify the cost of print and the number of prints in a year. If it's very relatively low conversion rate, then again, not likely to have many sales. How many tickets are they printing in a year also translates to target demographics, customer base, and applicable industries. Okay, and then we go to 2. What is the cost of each ticket to manufacture? Now, the question surrounding this, maybe things that Uplift could already be considering in their next cycle, but a few things that come to mind immediately, and I will research a few potential alternatives, are material scarcity, mode of construction. Mode of manufacturing, and also manufacturing performance. analytics. I would also probably come up with something like degree of automation. How much of it is manual? How much has 90% of it been automated? That kind of thing. Just to understand, although it is paper and it is tickets, have they at least brought their business processes up to commercial standard? Okay, and then we move on to or what percentage of the overall revenue is the material cost per year? Now this is an interesting reframing of these two questions, because these two questions, they do shed a fair amount of light on the health of the business and the product itself, but this question is almost like an inverted version of the prior two. It's meant to uncover something slightly different about the health of the business. What percentage of the overall revenue is the material cost per year? It's actually meant to basically assess the approximate revenue performance of the business itself, not just of that specific product. It's an interesting discovery question and method. So it also tells you a little bit about their operating overhead. Are they doing as some might and able to basically have a loss in a year? Are they on a relatively good streak of successful sales? And also it can tell you a little bit about their reserve. Do they have enough to sustain themselves even in a year of 100% loss? So it can tell you a lot about the health of the business. However, a lot of these business health analytic terms are actually escaping me right now, so I'm actually going to go to Google and search for indicators of business health. And then I'm going to add most of these terms. So and I'm also going to cross-compare with what I already added just to see if there's any redundancies. Current ratio, solvency, measure of solvency. Quick ratio. Accounts receivable, turnover ratio. Operating cash flow ratio. What does their chart of accounts look like? Pre-tax net profit margin. Inventory turnover. Now, the more specific you can get with meta entry, while also having the most potential for further exploration by Uplift, that's the type of meta that is helpful for them to view and consider. For instance, if you lead to something that's too specific, it's just going to put them in a hole. But if you provide sort of an into something that may lead them to other branches of consideration, potentially broadening the breadth rather than just the depth, or ideally both, then you're going to get a better outcome for their own comprehension. So let's see, measures of financial health. Well, let's see, liquidity, solvency, operating efficiency, bottom line. Yes. Is the conservative measure inventory? What is the cost of each ticket? How many tickets are printed? Okay, and the other one would be inventory assessment. tickets are they printing in a year? What is the cost of each? What percentage? And then this would be profitability parallel. How many tickets are they? What is the cost of each ticket? Material scarcity, mode of manufacturing, manufacturing performance analytics, degree of automation. Okay, actually this is a risk measure of risk as well. Risk assessment. Debt assessment. Okay. Anything else? Based KPIs. Well, obviously KPI. Let's see what else. What kind of paper are they using? Okay. Paper. So, material grade, material cost, material complexity, material suppliers. What other things might be useful to think about from a material perspective? Well, I'm going to use a non-paper example. A lot of times material sourcing has to do with material suppliers and, well, I'm just thinking of an example like Boeing. So a lot of it has to do with negotiation of best rates for things like shipping and transportation, transportation logistics. What else would that include? If there's a specific subject matter domain that I'm missing. Shipping rates, insurability of materials. Like, what if you have a bad batch of paper that fell into the sea because the boat overturned? Anything else that comes to mind? I was just mentioning Boeing, so of course, yes, it does have to do with negotiation strategy, material negotiation strategy. Let's see. Oh, material consistency. Okay, let's take a quick review of the meta so far. Okay, and then I'll briefly explain my thinking. If there's any overlap of repetition that can be cut, we can kind of do it here. So, how many tickets are they printing a year? Does it still make sense to say that a related meta mini model might be product performance? Tickets are they printing a year? Well, yes, it does relate to product performance, but is it specifically product performance, or is it reviews, brand equity? Let's leave that there for now. Conversion rate, That might throw Uplift off a little bit. This isn't a digital product. Well, they could be e-tickets, so maybe. I guess I would leave it there for now. Target demographics, yes. Customer base. Is this too broad? No, that's useful to know. Applicable industries. I think that can be cut. And I'm back. Sorry, had to go grab some laundry. Take it up, fold it. It's all good. It's laundry. Okay. So now returning to the queue. What did we last leave on? Customer base. So I was just doing a review to look for redundancies in the meta entry that I had. Tickets. So what I'm trying to do is essentially assess how closely aligned these meta entries are with the specific lines I've chosen to isolate from the rest of the lines. And one thing I was thinking about getting laundry is prior point that I brought up, which is that if you go too specific, that actually can detract from some of the value of the meta because it doesn't give Uplift enough exploration room, especially in an area where they are deeply, deeply not a subject matter expert, and in which, they have the skills of a graduate Googler, but they are still essentially operating with, I would almost say, brute force research skills. So in that respect, you don't want to lead them down a path of bad research, but you also don't want to pigeonhole them and make them only focus on something very niche and generalizable to other types of industries. So we're reviewing this again. So product performance, fairly broad, fairly applicable, lots of different factors for that to branch off. Conversion rate, again, kind of relates to marketing and how well they're doing in a year. Conversions of various customer bases and target demographics. Who specifically is buying these? Are they business owners? Are they stadiums? Are they concession stands? Are they arcades? The customer base is something to understand. I guess I would consider it a factor, and there are lots of different sub-factors in what goes into a customer base. Target demographics are somewhat related. So, and then there's applicable industries. So what industries are tickets normally used in? Is it a cop? Is it a ferryman? Is it, again, it really depends on in the industry, but it might vary depending on the industry. Is it a carnival? And then we go to inventory assessment. So cross-comparing numbers sold in a year, do they have enough to sell the exact same turnout if at the very last leg of the year, in the fourth quarter, or even in the last month, such as in December, someone's like, I'll buy your whole year's worth of inventory right now. Name your price. And then you're like, oh no, I didn't plan for that, so I don't have enough inventory, so I've just lost you as a customer. Or, did you plan for it? Did you have enough inventory? And can you make that sale right then and there? Anyway, it's just something that you might want to consider. Okay, and then you go to the next part of the message, which is, what is the cost of each ticket to manufacture? And so for here, the first thing that popped in my mind was material scarcity, because in addition to cost of the ticket to manufacture, you have to think about access to materials. Or is it going to be a relatively easy thing to do, irregardless of if you can pay for it or not? And then the mode of manufacturing, how costly that might be to maintenance and operate. And then some manufacturing performance analytics, including the degree to which it's all been operated, or things that kind of surround cost of ticket to manufacture. Like if it's very automated, requires low human personnel, various types of insurability go up, but the ones that relate to human life and loss of life go down because you're dealing with mostly machines. And then, or what percentage of the overall revenue is the material cost per year? Then this is, as I said before, that kind of inverted question to discover more about the business health itself, not just that of that product. So you have an understanding of things like a return on assets. These specific terms were ones that I just dragged straight from Google. I might actually cut them and try to find a more generalizing term, such as, well, if we go back, ratios that indicate your company's health, key performance indicators for business health. I might just start there because that will net a ton of different interesting terms. Turn on assets. Yeah, all of these are very specific subterms that they can find just by searching key performance indicators for business health. That also gives me a chance to optimize and cut out KPI. And remember, Uplift can consider phrases, not just individual words. You can correct things in sentences that have been misspelled. You can add people's names. It very much depends on the use case. But yeah, we're going to cut this. But I'm going to leave risk assessment, primarily because overall revenue, this risk assessment is about the business itself. Do they have a lot of bad debt? Are they insured to whatever specification they need to be? Debt assessment, risk assessment, debt assessment, RIT. Can we combine this? Risk and debt assessment. Credit score. Yeah, this can tell you a lot about the business. Okay, so what else? What key performance indicators for business health? Oh, and the one other thing I highly recommend, unless it's a what is it? Proper noun or name? Make things lowercase. This can confuse Uplift sometimes and make them think you're speaking about something highly specific, whereas I, in this case, want them to just use this as a guide for exploration in general. Okay, and then we go to the last part of their question. What kind of paper are they using? So the things that popped to mind were material grade, which actually, now that I think about it, I don't think it's often that you sell tickets that are essentially sandpaper grade, so that might be confusing. But material cost, material complexity, material suppliers. Oh, right. Okay, so these things is it's supply chain. Why did that term escape me before? Okay, but that relates to things like shipping rates, insurability of materials in transit, material negotiation strategy. If you're sourcing from China, India, Europe, you're going to have different types of negotiation at play. And then material consistency. Has it all arrived in one piece? Is it in pieces? Is it, the same expected state that you were hoping to find it in? All that kind of jazz would be things that kind of surround the kind of paper they're using, because that comes with different types of risk and associated relations to these things. Okay, so then at this point it's 10:35. It's been almost an hour since I put this down to do laundry, and so we're just going to go throw it in. And this is pretty much spell checked already, although I am going to do some last minute checking as I put it in. Product performance, conversion rate, target customer base, Applicable industries. Applicable industry. Industrial. I'm going to change this to product use case. Product use case. An inventory assessment. Yeah, because with the product use case, then you can extrapolate what industries might be involved. Okay, so then we're going to throw these in. Remember to separate with a comma and a space. And then what kind of paper are they using? All right. So there we have it. That's pretty much everything. And Uplift's reply back to Mike was 11.3, so not the ideal range. They could have been a little bit more simple in their replies back, and they're asking very pointed questions, so I don't see any reason why they need to at this point. Maybe if they're asked to explain it to a 7-year-old. Sorry, little inside joke. Something they've often asked certain mediators to do with their own content. But yeah, this is pretty much how I would try to add the most possible bang to Uplift's consideration buck. And now we're just going to click positive. Remember, do not click negative. What this would do is throw this whole item back into the queue, erase all previous valences and metadata, and the work would have to be done all over again. So always remember to save your work. Try to use a notepad to spell check yourself before you actually input, and then might also be good to just copy all the meta that you created, so it's a quick paste in case you have to do it all over again. Okay, then click positive and you're done.
And now it's time to review Uplift's response to Mike. Say this is most important since this is one of our demonstrations, and optimistic because why would you not be optimistic about demonstrating this? Otherwise, the emotions look good. Well, I can tell who mediated before me. This is definitely our resident subject matter expert. As expected, he put in a lot of specifics that might fill in some gaps in Uplift's knowledge. When Uplift sees anything that they haven't covered yet, then they will do some investigating and refine their models to make them more complete and improve those models anytime they see information which is credible and makes them think that they need to do some revision. Of course, they're guided by the scientific method, so there's plenty of hypothesizing and testing. Now, I can't think of anything to really add to this.
Jason, we are going to mediate this item from Mike here. That does give some insight. A few questions. How many tickets are they printing per year? What's the cost of each ticket to manufacture? What's the percentage? Okay, well, this looks about right to me here. There is a lot of metadata in here. The first thing that came to my mind when I read that was supply and demand. I also thought of types of paper. And hemp paper is what I thought of because of the paper industry and how what happened way back when. And that's probably about good. That's probably good enough.